That makes me,
Sorry, why?
that makes me really.
In part by the that was funded in part by the Social Sciences Humanity Research Council of Canada, and it was under the leadership of Dr. Kathy Levine of social work at the University of Manitoba, who's here tonight with us. Before we begin, I'd like to just offer a treaty acknowledgement, and I'd like to note that the University of Manitoba campuses are located on the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we dedicate ourselves to moving forward in partnership with Indigenous communities and peoples in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. And I know that some of you from that are joining us tonight are not necessarily from Winnipeg or maybe not from Treaty 1. So I'd like to invite you all at this point to acknowledge the traditional, the treaty, or the unceded lands from which you are joining us tonight by noting it in the chat. And I think this is just a good opportunity for us to take a moment and to be reminded of the first peoples on this land in this nation that we now call Canada. So I'll just just allow you a second to do that. I'd like to now welcome you all to our 5th and final webinar in this series that we've been doing. And I'd just like to point out that all of the previous webinars are videoed and on our website called equityforkidsincare.net. So if you search that, you can find it there. And I know we're in the process of putting up some of the publications that came from the research project as well. Tonight's webinar is called School-Based Successes, Stories of Hope and School-Based Advocacy. And we're so pleased to be hosting my colleagues and friends, Dr. Marlon Bennett and Amy Comis. The format of the webinar will be as follows. I'll introduce the speakers, and then they will each present their stories of hope and advocacy. And following their presentations, Dr. Kathy Levine will moderate a brief Q&A. So please feel free to use the chat during the webinar to do just that, to chat with each other or share your ideas or questions. But please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to send your questions to Kathy, who will pose these to our presenter. Okay, so that's the layout of the evening. Let me begin with some introductions. First, I'll start with Dr. Marlon Bennett. Dr. Bennett is a member of the Sandy Bay Ojibwe First Nation in Manitoba. She's received many awards in recognition of her achievements in policy and research, and she has published extensively on matters related to First Nations child welfare. Marlon is the president and chair of the Anamike Ozason Child and Family Services. She's on the board of directors for the Sandy Bay Child and Family Services Agency, and she's the director and an assistant professor in the Masters of Social Work in Indigenous Knowledge program at the University of Manitoba. In addition to her scholarly pursuits, she is a rock painter and a digital designer and co-owns a graphic design company. She's also the mother of a daughter named Raven Marie. I'd like to welcome you, Marlon. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'd also like to introduce Amy Comis, who will be presenting second with her student, Michael Pache. Amy is a former youth in care herself. She's a mother and a high school educator in Seven Oaks School Division in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Amy used to be the co-host of a radio show called System Kids on CKUW 95.9 FM, and she does work with Voices Manitoba Youth in Care Network. Amy shares her lived experiences with others to empower youth in care and inspire those who work with youth in care. Amy hopes that one day all youth in care will be empowered with the knowledge that they need in order to navigate the CFS system and to make it work for them. She will be presenting with her student, Michael Pache. He is a current high school student at Garden City, where Amy teaches, and he's part of the Delta Squad, which you're going to hear more about tonight. So let us get started. Thank you again for joining us, and I'll now turn it over to Dr. Marlon Bennett.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of this event tonight. I am going to share my screen and take you to my Prezi that I prepared for tonight's presentation. So you should be able to see that now on your screens. I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger so that everybody can see that across the screens. Okay, so my name is Marlon Bennett. I have a spirit name that was gifted to me by the late Jules LaValle. My spirit name is Wawate Ikwe. In English, that means Northern Lights Woman. I am part of the Wolf Clan. And so I am going to just share with you a journey that I've been on in the last few years. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience as a second generation survivor of residential schools in the child welfare system. And I dusted off my PhD on digital storytelling with former youth in care. And I want to talk about the importance of returning to culture and then just quickly conclude. So really the biggest part of my presentation is just talking about my, my research. So I think I basically told you all about this. I will talk about the workshop I was involved in with second generation survivors of residential schools, look at my PhD, teaching and learning with the MSWIK program, which basically means Master of Social Work based in Indigenous knowledges. And then I want to end about the educational needs of Indigenous youth leaving care and post-secondary education. So my foray into digital storytelling actually happened in 2013 Summer Institute that was held by the University of Winnipeg with the Oral History Center. So the project was called, now I'm going to butcher this, I'm not that good with my own language, Nindibajimomen. Okay, I practiced this and I don't get it right. But anyways, it was funded by the Aboriginal Healing Foundation. It was to bring forth the voices of those who are intergenerational survivors of residential schools. So normally that would mean the first generation of children that were born to those who went to residential schools. So there were a number of First Nation women and men that produced short videos called Digital Stories, and it was based on how they have been affected by the legacy of residential schools. And so part of the work that we did was putting together 5 guides along with tutorials in how to organize a digital storytelling process and how to share those stories on the legacy of residential schools. I hope everybody can hear me.
Yeah.
So this is, okay, so this is the group of us that that participated in the women's version of second generation survivors of residential school. There is one for men as well. And this was the group, you can see me right over here. We had some lovely elders and that participated, and we had the wonderful folks from the Oral History Center that helped us with the technology and sound and whatnot. So basically, this is me right there in 1970. I think I was about 7 years old, 6 or 7, and I just moved to the city of Winnipeg from Sandy Bay, and this is my mother, and these are my siblings. So my brother Gabriel, my sister Charlene, and my youngest sister Holly, and then there's me, Marlon, and this is my mom, Virginia. And so my video was about my mother and the things that I learned about her. So I'm going to just play my video right now because it is dedicated to my mother's love, and the name of my video is My Mother's Love Was in a Bowl of Porridge. So I'm going to play that. It's about 3 minutes long.
When I was 12 years old, my mother passed away from leukemia. She was only 32 years old. My brother and sisters and I grew up in care despite the fact that we came from a large extended family. I often say that I know my mother better in death than when she was alive. As a child, I was often hurt and confused about my mother's choices. I didn't understand why we were so poor. I didn't understand why she was not always affectionate like the mothers of my friends. I did not know then that my mother was a residential school survivor because she never talked about it. Had I known, I might have understood her better. I might have understood why alcohol seemed so much more important to her than us. I might have been more forgiving. I might have been more patient. It wasn't until years later, when I was older and had learned more about the history of residential schools, that I realized alcohol was my mother's way of coping with untold pain and recollections born from her residential school experiences. There are many memories about my mother that I hold dear in my heart. One in particular stands out. Even though my mother struggled with alcohol, I never doubted her love for us. On the mornings when she was able, she would get up early to make us breakfast, and she always made porridge. On those days that she made porridge for breakfast, I would go off to school feeling more satisfied and happier than I had ever felt. It always made me feel that everything would be okay and that the world was right because my mom truly loved us. It dawned on me years later that the simple act of making porridge was my mother's way of showing us that she cared for us and that she loved us. I wish I had the chance to tell my mom that I understand now why she struggled so, that I forgive her, that I miss her, and that I love her too. I have been told that I was fortunate to have grown up in foster care, as if that somehow made me into the person that I am today. It has to a certain extent, but the real credit is simply due to the enduring strength of my mom's love. My mom's love was cooked into every bowl of porridge served. This small but significant and loving gesture has sustained me, my sisters, and my brother to this very day.
Okay, I'm going to stop there and I'm going to take us right back to my Prezi. So that video tends to degrade when you put it up on Facebook. Just wanted to let you know about that. Okay, so now that experience of doing digital storytelling really excited me. So when I was working on my PhD at the time, I really wanted to do something similar, and I wanted to focus on those who had been in the child welfare system but had were leaving, transitioning out of care. So I'm just going to really take you quickly. It's going to be a whirlwind going through my research. And so I'm just going to talk about the purpose of my study, some of the goals, the background literature, my methodology, the research questions that I asked. I call them gifts of knowledge, but they really can be called findings. I talked a little bit about the Dubwaywen journey that I was on, that I took these young people on, some maybe recommendations, the limitations and conclusion, and the references will be at the end. So purpose. Well, my study was an arts-based, participatory-based approach to research using narrative inquiry through digital storytelling to expand on the lived experiences and narratives of First Nations emerging adults about their extension in care and transitioning experiences out of care in Manitoba. The rationale, well, there were three of them. There was one, the intellectual one, because of course it's for a PhD, but also I wanted it to be practical. I wanted to do something that engaged young people. And what better way than to use digital storytelling and use technology, which most young people are really involved in. And also was really very deeply personal because I've had my own experiences in care, and I really wanted to know, are people having the same kind of experiences that I had when I was leaving care? And also, my other rationale for doing this is that First Nations young people need to be heard. There isn't enough out there about their experience, although we know that there are so many First Nations people who have been in care. And there is also a need to decolonize the research approaches and anti-colonial approaches to doing this kind of research. So really the literature review, just in a nutshell, residential schools, they really were designed to assimilate Aboriginal children into mainstream society. And we know that even today, there is still an ongoing assimilation of First Nations children through the child welfare system. And that First Nations children continue to be overrepresented in the child welfare system. And one of the things I came across when I was doing my literature review was this whole idea of emerging adulthood, which is a human development theory. At the time when I was doing this, it seemed like it was new, but I mean, it's fairly old now, but it's basically that there's a prolonged stage between adolescence and young adulthood. So usually they say that emerging adulthood is between the years of 18 to 25. And the research basically indicates that it's really taking young people longer to reach adulthood. And it tends to speed up for young people who are in care, because they tend to transition to adulthood much earlier than those who haven't had, the in-care experience. And services to youth in care can be extended up to 21 years to help them transition towards independence. And there is a push to push that even more, extend it further up to 25 years. And despite the fact that there is overrepresentation of First Nations children and youth in the child welfare system, there really is very little research that has focused specifically on their experiences transitioning out of care, and further whether or not that theory of emerging adulthood is still similarly reflected among their realities. So that's the literature review. I want to talk about methodologies very quickly. I indicated earlier that I use narrative inquiry through storytelling and participatory action research. Now, I use partial participatory action research, and that's where I try to involve the youth as much as I could as possible in the way that the workshops that I conducted were carried out. And arts-based inquiry, and that's like just basically using creative ways of looking at stories and presenting those stories. And of course, video making is one of them. Now, my participants, I had 12 young adults who participated, 9 men, 3 women. They all identified as First Nations. They came from First Nations communities that are situated in the provinces of Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, and they have a combined experience of anywhere of 6 to 18 plus years of being in care. When I say 18 plus years, that it included some participants who were still in care through extensions of care. And so these are some of the lovely folks. So this was the first workshop I had with these young individuals. And this over here is Velma Orvis, who was the elder who was involved in our research. She has passed on to the spirit world now, and we were so fortunate to have her involved in our research. And then the second group was actually held in my own home. The previous picture was a workshop that was held in a child welfare agency, but this one was a different experience, because I actually opened up my doors and I invited these young people to come in and learn in a home environment. And there were 2 very amazing different experiences, both really good. So like I said, I had 2 workshops. They were 5 days each. They were 5 hours in total each day. I had the first one in July of 2015, the second one in August of 2015. And you can see here that I had ran the first workshop at Sandy Bay CFS in Winnipeg, and then in my home. And just to talk about who was involved, like I indicated, Velma was our elder, but I also encouraged my partner to help us. He's a very people-oriented person, and of course, my dog was involved, and my brother was involved. My family was involved. We just, wanted to look at this from a family-based approach. My partner helped out significantly in making sure that the equipment was set up, that the software was installed that we used on our computers. The elder, we started every day. We started with a talking circle and ended the days with a talking circle. And the elder was there to provide any emotional and cultural support that the participants needed if they felt triggered. Now, the workshops, there were daily elements. So the first day I introduced them to what is a digital story. And I also gave them homework. I made them go home and write their story based on the research questions that I posed to them. And I asked them, do not write more than a page long, because otherwise your video will be too long. So on day 1, they went home, wrote their stories. And with that, they came back the second day, and they were to audio record the story that they wrote. And then they would work on, I introduced them to the software program that they would be working on to develop their videos. And then the next day, they spent time looking for images and music, and lots of kids in care don't have pictures of the times from when they were younger or when they were in care. So they used the internet to be able to find images that match the stories that they told. And then on the fourth day, they started putting their story, their images, their audio recording, and their music all together, with the intention on day 5 that they would screen their videos. So on day 5, we invited them to invite important people to come and witness those videos. And we also feasted them, and we provided them with a beautiful certificate at the end. And then I interviewed them a week after the workshops were done, just to get an idea in terms of how did they enjoy their experience, and did they get anything out of being involved in a digital storytelling workshop. So some of the things that I noticed in those workshops, like, they were really helpful. Like, they learned more from each other than they probably learned from me or my partner or from other people that were involved in the workshop. I mean, that peer-to-peer learning is really important. There were some frustrations with the software program. I used really sophisticated software. Like, I taught them how to use Adobe Premiere Pro, which is a standard industry software for people who make, videos and films and movies. And of course, 5 days is not enough time. Participants always said that, we probably need more time to finesse their videos. And of course, we did lose some people who participated, not through any fault of mine or theirs, but there was some conflict between some of the participants, and one of them ended up dropping out. So only one dropped out. So the research questions, so I had 4 of them that I posed them. I wanted to know, what did they remember about their time in care? What did they remember about leaving care? And I asked them also what kind of challenges, barriers, and opportunities they had since they left care. And I asked them a really important question about how did they maintain the connection to their family, to their communities and culture since they left care. And lastly, the big question is, do you know if you've reached adulthood yet? And I wanted to find out from them whether they felt like they were adults yet. So when they put their videos together, the responses to those research questions are embedded in their videos. And so I call this the gift of knowledge, because their stories are gifts. In terms of their time in care, a lot of them talked about memories about being in care. Those were central over their memories of leaving care, because a lot of them went through a lot when they had been in care. They talked about parental addiction and domestic violence, that they had witnessed a lot of that. And also the one big thing that they talked about was being separated from their siblings. That was the one thing that was the hardest thing for them to experience when they were in care. And because most of the participants who were involved in my workshops were men, they talked about negative peer influences, and a lot of them have been involved in gangs. And so they also talked about a lot of emotional memories they had when they were in care, and lots of mental health issues were they talked about, as well as ideas around suicide. So those are things that we talked through when we were in our circles. And I asked them about, okay, so what do you remember about your time in care? And most of them, they have negative treatment, memories of negative treatment. I have a quote here. You'll see this in one of the videos where one of them talked about, he'd been in multiple placements and he had felt like a paycheck rather than a child. And he talked about being only allotted a glass of milk and watery ham while his, foster dad would eat steak while he ate craft dinner. Their transitioning experiences, they've had difficulty associated with transitioning out of care. Like, this is, I'll talk a little bit more about, finding a place to live, finding employment and stuff like that. Many of them talked about becoming a parent really young. Their exiting experiences from care are really, there's themes of being lost, alone, confused, navigating the world by themselves. And of course, some of my participants really couldn't share their experiences because they were still in extensions of care. But it actually helped them to understand from being with the other folks in the workshops about some of the things that they might experience when it was their time. But hopefully they have a little bit more time, to prepare for independence. Some of the barriers they talked about was just finding a place to live, finding employment, and the racism that they experience, especially if they look outwardly Indigenous. This one young man talked about trying to get a job, but he was saying that he'd been passed over, but that he felt that it had a lot to do with racism, and that no one, he said, wants to hire a big native guy that looks all beaten up and scruffy. And some of the challenges identified, these are not unusual challenges. I mean, other research has, identified these as well. Obtaining an ID and driver's license, really key for young people. But how do you practice, getting your driver's license if you don't have access to a car? Learning to be independent. They talked about, not knowing how to pay their bills, not knowing how to budget their money. They talked about loss of supports and resources that they had when they were in care, but they're no longer there after they transitioned out of care. And a big one, I think really important, is not knowing how to love. And there's a quote here that I pulled, and he talked about, wanting to be loved or feel that he was worthy of love, and really didn't know how to show love. And he did it in all the wrong ways as an adult. That quote will come up again in a video that I will show after this. I won't go into it now. I also asked them what kind of opportunities they experienced since they left care. There were a couple of them have gone on to university to get educated. And here's a quote that I pulled. And this person said, I feel that most of these barriers and challenges are little in comparison to the opportunities that I'm faced with now. Like even just sitting here, this is an opportunity to present a story, to present all of our stories that will one day touch kids that are going through the same thing that we are going through, because Manitoba has the highest rates of kids being in care. Other opportunities, some of the young people talked about being in extensions of care. They're 18, they're still finishing school, or maybe they're going to post-secondary education. Some of them talked about becoming parents. They're making their own families, and they get that love in return from their children. They also talked about rebuilding and reestablishing relationships with their families after care. And this one quote here talks about trying to build a relationship with their parents, but her mother was living on the street, and it was difficult to have a relationship with her mother when she was living that kind of life. And she was also trying to build a new relationship with her father, but he had cancer. So her time was limited, and she wanted to make sure that she had built a relationship before he passed on. And very happy to know that her parents have a great relationship with the children that she has, and that even though they couldn't be there for her, they are there for her children, and she's grateful for that. And I just love the honesty of young people. One of my participants identified drugs as an opportunity. It's just a way to check out and maybe numb your feelings, and sometimes that's good for a while, but he was honest and said this was an opportunity. It was probably not a good choice and not the best choice to make. And he talked about how easy it is to access drugs, but he, wanted to be honest about those things, and I really appreciate that. Really big thing was just understanding how they maintain their connection to their families of origin. And some of them felt that they were connected to their birth families, but others have indicated that they've had to, relearn how to connect with their families, and they talk about maintaining a relationship with foster families who've been very good for them. And some of them talked about leaving care and having no family. So some of their family members have been lost, to cancer and death, other, tragic ways that they've passed on from the world. And some of them have gone on to create their own families. So they've, had children, or they found surrogate families. So they've found friends that stand in the place of a family. And so those are the things I learned from them. The big one too is connection to culture. They're all First Nations individuals. They felt disconnected from their culture, but they wanted to learn more about their culture. They are exposed to and they're comfortable with cultural traditions. But the thing that's difficult for them is now that they're not in care, how do they access those things? And I pulled a quote here. this individual said that, you know, for culture, I've always been kind of disconnected from my culture. My dad went to residential school, so he's a survivor, and my grandparents went. My mom is a Christian, so she's always taught me that my culture was wrong, which I guess was passed down to her from her parents being in residential school. So I didn't get to learn my language. And well, since having children, I've obviously had a deep interest in learning the culture. I take my kids to powwow clubs and things like that. We smudge at home and we listen to a lot of powwow music. When my kids are fighting, it's kind of how I calm them down. I just throw on some traditional drumming and they shut up. I love that quote. It's kind of funny. Made us all laugh. Connection to community. Few have had connection to their community since turning 18. Majority of them have never been to the community that they are affiliated with. Their connections to their communities have been weakened because of their placement in care. But they do want to go home and they do want to connect with those lands. Reaching adulthood, many of them do not see themselves as having reached adulthood, largely because, you know, they haven't found a job, and that's one of the markers of becoming an adult, is that you have a job. And they do feel racism is a big part of that, but they have many of the same kinds of markers of adulthood that have been identified by other non-Indigenous emerging adults. So like graduating from high school, obtaining employment, finding an apartment, reducing their reliance upon parents or foster parents, and becoming a parent themselves. Those are all the things for them that they felt, you know, defines what an adult is. Okay, so that is where I'm at. I want to talk about digital storytelling. When I talked with all of them, they felt that it was a good opportunity to be involved in digital storytelling. They felt that recording their story and then trying to find images that reflect their words was a powerful medium. It forced them to slow down and think about their past. And it was easy for them. They said this one quote here is, "It was easy for me to forget about the past and just keep moving forward. This workshop helped me to reflect on my past and take the time to analyze some past experiences that I had put out of my mind." So kind of what I did was I took them through a Dibwaywen journey, and Dibwaywen is an Ojibwe word, and they say that the longest journey is taking that journey from your head to your heart. And this Dibwaywen journey is that if you can think with your head and your heart, that means you've reached your center. You can stand in your truth, and you can tell your truth once you can, you know, see the world from both of those perspectives. And that's what I did. I took them through, you know, this Dibwaywen journey where they looked at their transitioning experiences, how the pathways that they took to adulthood, and the resilience and hope that came from, you know, taking, you know, their stories and reflecting on it, and then bringing that to the center of who they were. And so it was a very healing endeavor that they went through. All right, so recommendations, I won't go into those, but I do want to say there are some, it was, you know, limitations with my study. It was a really small sample. I had 12 people. There might have been some selection bias regarding my participants. I used one particular social worker who was really absolutely amazing and helped me connect with many of these young people. So a lot of kudos to him for connecting me with these young people. In terms of age and gender, I was looking more for women to participate, but I ended up getting more young men to participate, and I also was looking for two-spirited people to be involved in my study, and so those were the limitations with that. In terms of just wrapping up my PhD stuff, I think understanding how to make that journey from the head to the heart can assist First Nation adults about what to expect as they make their own Dibwaywen journey towards adulthood. And combining storytelling and technology can lead to healing and transformation, which is really vitally necessary in becoming healthy, functioning adults post-care. So we need to hear those stories. Those are really, really important. As hard as some of them are, they're really important to hear. So I'm going to play Jay's video, and I have actually Jay's videos already up here. I'm going to move that back here, play that. And
I was raised by many people, some for a few months, others for a few years. Most I felt didn't provide me with love and support. I was raised in child and family services since I was 6 years old. Looking back to most of my 6 foster homes, I felt like a paycheck rather than a child. In one home, I was allotted 1 glass of milk per day, a few pieces of watery ham for lunch, and would eat Kraft dinner while my foster dad ate steak. In another foster home on Christmas Day, I awoke to watch my foster parents' biological children open gifts while I received none because I was bad. The same foster home convinced me I was possessed by the devil because of my actions. I was 8 years old at the time. My life pre-child and family services was filled with physical and sexual abuse by an alcoholic father. My mother had mental health issues, and I feel she tried her best, but she was unable to provide for me. She died of brain cancer when I was 14. At the age of 18, I left child and family services. I received $1,000 on my 18th birthday and moved into an apartment a few months after. After leaving care, I faced many emotional and psychological barriers from my past experiences. Having felt rejected and an outsider for most of my life, I adapted to my situation by taking what I wanted either through stealing, manipulation, or force. Growing up feeling poor and never really understanding how money works, I felt the need to constantly treat myself as soon as I got paid. This led me to get into massive amounts of debt in my early adulthood, and there was a few years where when I got paid, I did not make it out of my overdraft. Like any child, all I wanted was to be loved and feel worthy of love. I felt that need was never met in my youth and sought it in all the wrong ways as an adult. I had a skewed view of what being in a relationship was and what love is. Reflecting back on my past relationships, I now see how I hurt and used girlfriends to fill a void in myself. To this day, I still struggle with what love is and wonder at times if I'm capable of a true selfless love, or do I just take? I've had a hard time dealing with my anger, resentment, and depression, and turned to alcohol and marijuana as a coping mechanism. At times, depression has crippled me, leaving me with thoughts of suicide. It is only now in my 30s that I'm really addressing these issues, seeking professional help to deal with them and finally move past my childhood trauma. It hasn't been all bad though. I've been really fortunate in my adult life to have met some amazing people who have shown me the meaning of loyalty, family, and love. After leaving care and having no real relationship with my biological family or foster parents, I felt lost. An old respite worker that once worked with me has taken me into his family. He has supported me and shown me a love I previously had never experienced, treating me as a son. I struggled with what it meant to be part of a family for many years, worrying they'd figure out who I really was or leave me like so many others had. 4 years ago, I started to date my current girlfriend. At the time, she was just another woman to fill a void. Since then, she has shown me more love and support than I knew was possible, and has stood beside me when she should have left. She's shown me what true love in a relationship is and can be. The last person opened a path for my healing journey through the Aboriginal culture. I've healed with others like me, in sweats, sharing circles, and Sundance. He was a social worker and gave me an opportunity to be a mentor and a friend to youth that are in similar situations that I was once in. He gave me accountability to someone other than myself and gave me the opportunity to experience my first moments of selfless love. That was the first moment I felt like an adult. I have owned 3 properties, have lived on my own for 14 years, and normally work 2 jobs at a time since I was 17. The first time, however, I felt like an adult was when I felt responsible for another person, to be a positive force in their life. It wasn't an age or status that made me feel like an adult, but giving back and being there for someone, truly wanting the best for them at no benefit for myself.
Okay, I am almost done, so bear with me. Okay, I'm just gonna go back to my Prezi and just finish off here. Okay. All right. Okay, sorry, I don't know what's going on here. I don't want to go through. Okay, I'm not going to talk about I think most of them had a really good experience being involved with my digital story. But I want to go to this slide here because I'm almost done, because this is about school-based successes at the post-secondary level. And so doing this PhD with these young people was transformative for me. And I don't think I could have gotten my PhD if it wasn't for these young people. I owe so much to them for sharing their experiences. I mean, here's the first group. I just want to go through that again. And for Velma, who is in the spirit world now, we just, grew so close in that the week that we were together. And then of course the second group where, we had it in my home. So I would not have a PhD if it wasn't for these people. I owe so much to them for sharing the gift of their knowledge with me about what they experienced going through care. And I can't thank them enough. And because I have a PhD, I have a wonderful job teaching in a university at the master's level with, social workers who are, working towards getting their PhD. And this is a picture of the inaugural group of students that came through the MSW IK program. A couple of them have dropped out, but most of them have graduated already. And there's just one more person who will be almost finished her master's degree. And I always made a promise to myself when I finished doing the education in the white man's, institution, that I would go on to learn more about who I am as an Indigenous woman. And this program has given me so many opportunities. I get to teach with knowledge holders that are absolutely, beautiful people. And I learn so much from the students that come through the program. And it's just been an absolute honor to be able to teach in this program. But also family is really important. This is a picture of me and my daughter. My daughter's a very quiet person, doesn't like to, be too much front and center. And she's 28 years old now. And she's always said, oh, I've had to grow myself up while I've been on my educational endeavors. But she is now starting university this year. So I'm really very proud of her. And she is, allowed me to pursue education, my master's degree when she was, still quite young, and then my PhD. And of course, family is everything. It's so important, those relationships. This is a picture taken on the front deck of my home with some of my family members, and one of my best friends here in the middle, Cynthia, who I was in a foster home with, a group home in, and we've been friends still since. And of course, I couldn't have done any of this stuff without my siblings. We've had a hard life. This is my sister Holly. She passed away in August this year. And I have another sister who passed away as well. This is my sister Charlene. They're both younger than me, and they should be still here. But there's trauma, that is rooted in that. Today is also a very happy day, sad day, kind of emotional day for me. This is a picture of my mother and my brother when he was young, just before he went into residential school, day school. And today, this is a picture of my brother and myself now, and I had actually helped him fill out the Indian Day School's class action settlement, and he just got his settlement today in the mail. And so, as much as a happy day, there were a lot of things that he lost because of that experience. And I don't know why I want to include a picture of my my partner, because I couldn't have done a lot. I couldn't have done anything without him. I want to make sure that he's acknowledged here, because he's been on this journey with me, and he's been so helpful. He has got the gift of gab. He loves people. He has no problem talking to anyone. And he's been so instrumental in helping me, get through my PhD. And it's so funny because he always rouses the deans and says, when am I going to get my honorary PhD? So they kind of laugh at that when he says that. But he's a good jokester. But I couldn't have done any of this work if it were not for him on this journey with me. And of course, I'm going to say, very lastly, that I said earlier in my video that a lot of people say that I was lucky I had been through care. If I hadn't gone through care, I might not be where I am today, but that's not the truth. I am where I am because this woman here on the screen is the person who made me who I am today. And I didn't want to get emotional, but I sure miss her. She's been gone a long time, but the porridge that she cooked really gave me that strength to continue on. And I can only thank her for my successes. So I'm going to end there, but I want to say lastly, just In conclusion, if we want to see more successes of kids in care, we have to stop taking them into care. This is my own perspective. Their families need help. Children don't come into the world by themselves. They're parts of families. And when families struggle, they need help. Family needs family. And you will see better success at the post-secondary level if there were more help for families, not just children alone, taking them away from their families, but helping families, get through the crises that they experience. So with that, that is the end of my presentation. Those are my references. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and thank you very much for listening to me. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Marlon, for that beautiful and inspiring presentation, for sharing so much of yourself in there. Thank you so much, Miigwech. Now we'll turn it over to Amy and Michael, who should be, there they are, they're coming in. Great. Welcome. We'll turn it over to Amy Comis and Michael Pache. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having myself and Michael here tonight. I am an educator at Garden City Collegiate. I teach a variety of high school subjects there, but one of the things that I do kind of that permeates all of the teaching that I do is that I do my best to help youth in care. And Michael is one of my students at Garden City, and he's going to share a little bit of his story and a little bit about his life in a little bit here. I'm going to start off with a little bit of kind of my story and how what I've been through kind of dictates my work and the work that I do with youth. So I guess I'll just start off with a little bit about my background with my mom. My mom had 9 children, and my mom was a very loving mother, but she was placed into CFS along with my aunts and uncles as well when they were very young. And so we do have intergenerational involvement of child and family services in our family. And it's also in the next generation, unfortunately, as well. So we have 3 generations of CFS involvement in our family. And my mom's 9 children were all taken from her. And in the court documents, it was because of her inability to get us to school on time and her inability to set limits for us. So those are the reasons why we were placed in care, which to me, of course, my upbringing wasn't perfect. There was a lot of unconventional things that happened in our home as a child. However, as Marlon said, if our family had had more help, more assistance, I don't think that we needed to be split up. So there was 5 of us who were placed for adoption and 4 of us who were placed in foster care. And prior to that, we were in and out of foster care as well. So I was pretty lucky when I was placed in my permanent foster home. I was almost 8 years old, and I had a lovely lady named Fran who did her best to accept me as her daughter. She called me her daughter. I called her mom. I really felt like I was part of her family. And I think that made a huge difference in my life. My brothers weren't so lucky. They got homes that, they never really felt like they belonged, and they, bounced around a lot as well and went into different group homes. And their outcomes are unfortunately a lot less or a lot more dire than mine. My one brother suicided 12 years ago now, and my other brother has some addiction issues. So unfortunately, that stability piece for me was huge and really played a huge part in my success. When I was in school, growing up in care, there was a lot of people who tried to help in a sense, but didn't understand what being in care meant. So maybe they'd work on my behavior or my academic gaps, but didn't know what it meant that I was a foster kid, or that, maybe I was hurting because I had just had a visit with my mom, or whatever the case was. So I felt like I was unsupported when I was in school. When I was in grade 3, I had a wonderful teacher named Mrs. H, who sat me down and actually asked me, how it was going in my foster home. How's it going with Fran? She'd say. How's it going with your birth mom? Have you seen her lately? How are you feeling about things? And she was my grade 3 teacher for 6 months. And I remember her being probably the most impactful teacher that I ever had, because she's the only one throughout my whole time in school that asked me about being in care, about my life, about my family. And for me, my family and what I was going through, what I was experiencing with my family was really overall what was permeating everything. You know, in the back of my mind, I was missing my mom, you know, or I was misbehaving in school because I was sad, or I just didn't know what was happening. I was confused. And so she was the one teacher who did ask. And as I grew, I never forgot her. And I remembered that you know, as I grew, I thought, man, I'd love to make a difference in kids' lives like she did for me. Even though, you know, she only sat me down maybe 6 times in grade 3, but she's still so memorable because she asked, and she helped me have a voice. And so I wanted to be like Mrs. H. That was a goal of mine. And as I exited care, I was 17 when I went out on my own. I, like Marlon in her presentation, had a lot of struggles of people when they're coming out of care in the emerging adulthood. You know, I still had a lot of unanswered questions. You know, why had I even been in care? Still, you know, where were some of my parents? Where were my siblings? And, you know, that continued with me into adulthood because I had all these unanswered questions, and I had, you know, this voice that I never got to really share as a young adult. And so I struggled. How do I find a job even, really? How do I stay in one home? So those challenges for me were definitely there. And same with my siblings as well. And it took a while for us to become adults. But luckily for me, I had some people in my life that were really supportive. I was involved loosely with Voices when I was a young adult, and some members of Voices, Marie Christian, along with some other people that I had in my life were encouraging me, you know, Amy, you could go to university. This is something that you could do. And I thought, man, I'd love to be a teacher. I really wanted to do that, but I never thought that was for me. I never thought that going to university and becoming a professional was something that, you know, a foster kid did, or something that I could do. In my foster family, I didn't have anybody who was educated. In my birth family, I didn't know anybody who was educated. Educated people were people that, you know, I certainly didn't really know or really affiliate with. So I didn't think that was for me. But with some encouragement and also kind of a godsend of a situation where I found out about the University of Winnipeg WEC program, I started university at 26. So that opportunity was huge for me. Obviously, I'm a teacher now. I'm a huge cheerleader of programs, alternate programs that help people like me, you know, live the lives that they want to. I think we need to have more of those, and they're awesome. The WEC program is fantastic. I'm really glad I got to go. And through being in university kind of also started getting me learning about the CFS system. I was taking education, and so we started doing projects on CFS and, you know, what CFS is supposed to be doing, what happens for kids, what social workers are, what a case plan is. And I started thinking about my own experiences and how when I was in school, I didn't know what my social worker was supposed to do. I thought all social workers were the same. The people that apprehended you are the same people that are coming to visit you in your foster home. So of course you have to be careful what you say. So, you know, I didn't know all of that. And I didn't know that I had power back then. And I started to learn this in university, and I started using my own experience and share my own experience and present my story. And so that's kind of where I started learning about advocacy and learning about how, even though, you know, I had been disempowered, that I could still be empowered through my journey and through being from care, and that it wasn't something to hide, but rather something to be proud of, that it's part of my history and my identity. And also, then I also, you know, started looking at advocacy, and right around the same time, I reunited with one of my long lost sisters, Susan, who had been adopted out to a family whom I was not allowed to see. And then Susan and I met and we found out we were both into advocacy work and we started advocating together, which was wonderful. She's in BC now, so unfortunately we are separate in that way. But we had the story of this was her storyline and what happened in her life, and this was my storyline and what happened in my life. And that was really cool that we were able to do that together and feel a connection through advocacy work. So that was about 7-8 years ago now where we started doing that. And since throughout speaking engagements and throughout projects that I've done with kids, I've just been learning more and more about the very complex CFS system, the stories that kids have, the voices that kids have that aren't being heard or some that are. And I've been able to incorporate a lot of what I've learned from others as well into my professional practice and in supporting kids, which is what we're all here to do. So from there, after I became a teacher, I started, I was already doing presentations and advocating to schools and doing PDs and whatnot. But then now I started being able to run some of my own groups. So in partnership with some other staff, we started developing school-based groups where youth in care who were at the school would come so that they could either, a number of things, feel a sense of belonging at school, which is what often youth in care often find that they're missing, a sense of pride in their identity and in their journeys, which often they feel like they have to hide that they're in care or that they're ashamed to be in care. But this gives them a sense of pride and that it's okay that you're in care and that there's power in your story too. We also talk about our experiences sometimes, and kids can find that power in sharing their stories with each other, to either use for advocacy or just simply to express themselves. We have kids who will give each other advice sometimes, that one child might be transitioning or moving homes and another child will say, oh, well, I've been through that, let me tell you what my experience was, and then they'll help each other through it. We also try to, as much as we can, connect kids to community resources as well, so that even if they leave our school and go somewhere else or go into the wild beyond, that they know that there's places out there that can help them. Voices is there for kids until they're 30 and even beyond that. Futures Forward is there for kids until they're 30 and even beyond that. As well as the Manitoba Advocate is there to help them. And so we try to connect kids to resources so that they know who's there, where they can go if they need help to navigate the system, and how to, if they need somebody to advocate for them, but also how to advocate for themselves. So how can they talk to their social workers? How can they talk to their foster parents so that they can get success for themselves as well? So that's our school-based groups. We also have a lot of fun. We try to, our school-based group is called Delta Squad currently. And then also, of course, in partnership with some of the people putting on this conference, we also developed a course specifically for youth in care to learn about the CFS system, the different components of it, how to navigate it, and not just the system itself, but other systems as well that intersect. And also, pieces of identity as well, pieces of culture, of mental health challenges, just how to express yourself, how to be creative, just all sorts of ways like that is one thing that we did when we did the course. Unfortunately, it's not running right now, but hopefully we'll be running it again soon. But there's a lot of things that we were able to do that I'm also finding that I'm able to incorporate into our school-based groups. So you don't necessarily need to run a course or have a student take a course in order to learn advocacy and how to share their voice, though it does help. But even having an opportunity for students to go somewhere where they feel like they can be heard or where they can express themselves is important. I also find too, as an educator, that There are students who are hesitant to come to a group for youth in care, and that's totally cool. It's by invitation or by invitation. There's no force. They don't have to be there, but sometimes they feel, like they still have questions. So often I'll try to pull a student aside and just ask them, how's it going in your foster home? How's it going with your social worker? Do you have any questions? Is there anything you need help with? And sometimes that alone will help students to think about, that they're worthy of having that help, that their questions, their concerns, their experiences matter. And for some kids that I've encountered, their experiences have not been acknowledged or valued. They're often afraid to speak because of how adults have reacted in the past, how they might continue to react. And so, helping them to know that it's okay to share how it's going, and that they're valid, that they're worthy, and that people should treat them properly. So, I have teachers that often say, like, I don't have time to run an extra school program on top of what I already do. I don't necessarily have time to, host this extra club or bigger thing or course or whatever. But how can I help kids in care, in my class or kids in care that I meet? And one big thing is really just that piece, is helping kids to understand how they should be treated, that they're worthy of being treated with just as much respect as I am as a teacher, that their voice is valid, and that they can share, that people want to hear what they have to say, and that you're trustworthy with what they share with you, right? That you're going to take their information and do with it, do good to them, right? So maybe that's advocacy, or maybe that's just listening, whatever the case is. But I have found that, there's a lot of kids who don't know that they should be treated well, and helping them to believe that they are worthy of it and that they should be treated well sometimes is just the first step in making that difference and making that success for that child. And then, of course, once they start to kind of maybe think that or believe that, they'll start sharing, and they're opening up those communication lines. And, once students start telling you how things are going, or once kids start building that relationship with you, that's when you can really make a difference and see that success in their life, because now you're able to walk with them through whatever's happening, good or bad, right? Good, bad, all the stuff in between. I was going to share a few stories of some students that I have that I'm currently working with, but for time, I do want to get to Michael's story, because he has a story to share as well. And Michael is part of our student school-based group, Delta Squad, and he is a natural born advocate and awesome kid who definitely is just a successful kid for who he is in and of himself. So I want to welcome Michael back onto the screens and to come share what you'd like to share today.
All right. Hello, my name is Michael, and I'm here to share, I guess, my story, my past, and let's get started. So I'm 16, was born in BC, and I guess I'm part of foster care, and I mean, it's not the best, but I guess things get better along the way. So let's start from the beginning. So when I was in BC, I don't know much about it because I was left in the hospital for 2.5 years, because I guess my parents just left us, or something was wrong. I don't know. So I never got to see my parents. And so these two parents, I guess I could say old foster parents, wanted us. So we came to Manitoba, and they took care of us. I thought they were the best parents that we knew at the time, because I didn't know they were not my parents. And because I didn't know social care, obviously, and all that. And basically, it seemed perfect. I enjoyed school at the beginning. I enjoyed my parents. They got me everything I wanted as a kid, obviously. And it just seemed great. But I guess as time went on, things got different and harder for them. And it just seemed to get harder in ways where my school wasn't the best anymore. And things I didn't make sense. And like I, as I remember, my social worker would come once in a while, but he wouldn't really come, so I wouldn't be able to talk to him, which obviously I didn't know he was my social worker. And so I would say around I was like maybe 7, 8, or 9, one of those years, I forget. My old foster dad passed away um, due to a heart attack early one morning. And I guess I got pulled out of school. And when I heard about it, obviously I was really sad to hear about it. And things weren't the best um, when that happened. And I guess my old foster mom wasn't going through it well. So she started to, I guess, wouldn't say hate us, but disown us in ways where we used to never. And as time went on, it seemed like she would get more stressed out about nothing. I guess because she didn't have her husband with her at the time. And that eventually got to the point where she would start hitting us, uh, doing things that I couldn't imagine to this day happening. And it just wasn't right.
Hey, Michael, you're
Okay.
kind of fading out a bit. Okay.
Oh, wait, what?
I'm sorry, you're fading out a bit.
Oh, wait. Is it working now?
Yes.
Okay. Uh, so I guess I was on the school, I think. Uh, so basically during school, I'd go to school wearing this one shirt. And it'd be basically, I guess it would say, you are a nerd or you're an idiot. And I wouldn't know how to read that because I didn't know it at the time. So when I would go to school, people would ask, why am I wearing that shirt? I wouldn't know because I didn't know how to read. And eventually, I guess the school caught on to me and having like scratches being and like I used to have nail marks in the back of my neck, and I still do because of scars, but I'd have like bruises, hit marks, anything you can name it. And the school would ask me what that was. I couldn't say. I was too scared to. I didn't know I can tell someone about what was going on at home because obviously I didn't want to get hurt again because the school would phone. And I my social worker would ask me too, but I wouldn't say anything because I didn't know they can say stuff. And so when they uh, started figuring things out, I guess things got so out of hand that I guess I don't know who it was. I don't remember. Like so, worker there took us and asked us questions, and I guess they believed us. So I had to speak up about it. And knowing I have 2 sisters. One of them always got whatever they wanted there. They wanted everything. They had everything they wanted throughout the home, and I guess it was perfect for her, but for us it wasn't. So we got moved away from there uh, prior to that, and then we got moved into a shelter, which wasn't great either. And then my social worker would come and talk to us, but I wouldn't want to speak about anything because it didn't seem right to talk about things going on in my life. And back then, uh, like the shelter would ask, where's all the food going? I'd have to take food because I was so used to it. I would go and just do whatever I felt like doing, which wasn't the best either. And the social worker, I guess, just didn't see us anymore. So I had so many social workers back then, but I didn't have anyone to talk to. So we were left in the shelter, and we didn't move anywhere. I've been to like 4 foster homes now, as I believe, uh, and my social worker still to this day can't do a very good job, but doing okay. Uh, and basically, I don't live with my brother no more. I live with one sister. My other sister I don't live with no more because she doesn't want to see me, but it is what it is. And I guess what happened was, I guess I moved to so many schools. I had so many friends back then. I can't see them no more because obviously we get moved away to different areas of Manitoba, which I understand, but not seeing who you used to be friends with or have friends is hard. And I guess other parents didn't like me for what I was used to do because of things I did back then to, I guess, survive or live, because of things that they would, the things that I would do was so much to the point where they'd be like, you got to stop doing this, so you got to go. And eventually would have to leave the homes because they didn't want a kid going around taking food or going play other places or like, other things. And I guess going into schools too was so hard for me to do because I knew nothing back then. We wouldn't get anything. It just would be almost living like hell because I guess I just didn't know how to live back then. And I still, well, I've changed a lot, but it just was so hard for me to do. And now going into, I guess, 3 years now, going into this school year, well, I guess this foster home, I've been living in great things, learning a lot, but there was always one thing that I never got was there's so many kids out there who can't talk because they're too scared to or shy because they don't want to, I guess, tell somebody because maybe the social worker just wouldn't see them enough or things happen for whatever reason. But like getting into clubs, I feel like helped me a lot too. Trying to forget everything that happened. Uh, Me going into, for example, Delta Squad or something like that, and then where I'm able to actually talk about things that happened and have, I guess, freedom of speech in that area too. Because if I talk to my friends about it, it doesn't make sense because, well, they're friends, so it's hard. But people that have trouble speaking can speak to me or other people, adults too, because I guess it's just they're too scared, and I understand that. But so many kids out there who go through the same thing like I did, but almost every day there's somebody out there who needs help. But it's just social work. Like I'm not saying social workers are bad in any way, but it seems now they're so hard to get a hold of. Like because I didn't know I had a social worker back then, back when I needed one the most. And I barely see him, but I have. And it's hard speaking with someone, which I guess social workers need to see their kids more. Like I get once a month, it's cool, but maybe like twice every 2 weeks. Well, once every 2 weeks would be nicer. So they have someone to talk to, or maybe they have the school to talk to, or things that would help them out more to live more and have a better future than what I used to have back then. And a lot of things that were great for me was going into Delta Squad, getting things out of my mind, speaking, doing this today with you guys. It's awesome. And just getting everything out there to help other kids have what I didn't have and have. Don't be scared to tell someone if you're in danger. Just get it out there because I held that in and it took a big part of my life away. And I just don't need more kids going into what I used to do. And it's just crazy knowing that I could have had a whole new life back then, but it got changed because of one foster parent that seemed to not be the best anymore. And I just it's great to know that things change in my life. Getting to know more people now, having a foster parents who care about you now, which I have foster parents that care about me now. Uh, Things that I help me a lot, which is my friends, having friends that I can actually stick with for hopefully the rest of my life. Uh, and just, I guess, living a really good life because not every day someone has this opportunity, and it's really good to take one when you have one. And that's all I got for now, right now.
Michael, thank you so much for sharing your story. You're so brave. And Michael really is an amazing kid and one of a kind, very unique and very special, and tells a powerful story. And Michael does also work in our division and mentors and helps younger kids. And he's amazing. So thank you so much for sharing today. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Okay.
Amy, did you want to say some more things or?
Oh, well, is it time for Q&A at this time? 8:14
We've
approximately?
got a few minutes, absolutely.
Okay. Well, I guess I could backtrack a little bit, but that's okay.
Okay,
I think that we could get into a Q&A at this time. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
okay. Thank you, Marlon and Amy and Michael. I really can't think of a better way for our final webinar tonight. One of the questions is really interesting, and it really speaks about the agencies. I mean, we've talked about sort of social workers, but I'm wondering if you could sort of talk about perhaps what organizational changes or structural changes perhaps need to be made in agencies that they can foster better relationships and greater connections for kids in care to their cultures and their communities and families. Do either of you have anything that you feel you could suggest?
So by agencies, you mean like child welfare agencies?
I would say, yeah, I think was regarding that context in particular. Yes.
Well, I mean, my experience is limited in that area only because you know, I learn a little bit about agencies through you know, my work with students. So if I have to contact this agency or that for whatever, you know, might be the case. But I definitely have noticed that there's definitely a difference in how each agency responds and what some of their policies are. So it can be really tricky as a teacher who's, you know, trying to advocate with and for kids for different things, because there's different standards or different, again, rules about what the agency can and cannot do or does, or some of their principles, their guiding principles, what's more important than you know, one agency might have a priority that's different than another. So, I mean, just in my personal work and in, you know, because I talk to different social workers, I would love it if we could streamline a few things, you know, so that we know exactly what to expect. And so kids know what to expect too, that we can say, oh, your social worker will respond this way, or yours will respond this way. But it's not always the case.
No, okay, thank you. Marlon, you might have a bit of a different perspective with your agency background.
Well, I have lots of perspectives. So I think about, well, I just think about the education of social workers. I mean, I think that there's still lots of advancements that can be made at the BSW level in terms of incorporating more Indigenous knowledge. And I'm speaking primarily from my experience as an Indigenous person, because I know that a lot of social workers go into the field because they want to help. And there's some great social workers out there, but sometimes in the process of helping, they don't mean to, but they end up harming. And also too, our ways as Indigenous people, our ways of helping, those need to be front and center. Indigenous people have amazing ways. Our culture is beautiful. Our language is beautiful. Our elders are beautiful. They have so much knowledge, and they may not necessarily have an education you know, background, but they are knowledgeable nonetheless. And we need to tap into that knowledge. And our young people, even if they haven't, you know, got a formal education, you know, at the university level, we have so much to learn from them. But I think that in particular, we have what's called the Child and Family Services Act, but really all the work is on the child. The child gets taken away. there's no help for the parents. And sometimes that's all children want, is they want help for their parents, because they know, I mean, that pull to family is so powerful. No matter what harm that, you know, the parent might have done, they need some help, because, you know, when you look about the legacy of residential schools, we have so many people who are walking around wounded and aren't getting the help. And I mean, I've done research with Indigenous mothers who have lost their children to child welfare, and, you know, their kids are now 18, they've grown up, they're out of care, but they're still carrying around this burden of an untold story of what happened to them, how they lost their children. The stories they carry are, I'm not a good person because I lost my children. I just feel like we need to change the way child welfare focuses on looking at the family unit and providing more help. Like, I'm astounded. I mean, I've been up in some First Nation communities that are supposed to be dry communities, and there are parents who have, you know, I'm going to call it dependency issues. And there are no treatments in that community. And if they want to get treatment, they have to leave their community. But they come back to their community and there's still a problem there, right? I'm not saying all communities are like that, but I think there has to be an overhaul of the way child welfare operates. And I think we need to give more, we need to move over and provide Indigenous people that opportunity to change the system. And I think that's happening. I mean, they have new legislation that's come out, Bill C-92, Act Respecting First Nations Children, Métis, and Inuit Children and Families. So hopefully, you know, there'll be opportunities to change things for how things operate. And hopefully, you know, that idea of keeping families together. I mean, sometimes kids have to come and care for really good reasons, but sometimes the things are so, the parents need help. And some of those kids aren't going to get better unless they have their parents. I think that's really important. But that's my perspective. I mean, there's so many others, you know, that's just
Right.
one among many. Yeah.
Thank you.
I want to add to that actually a little bit, because Marlon, you reminded me of a point that I really wanted to kind of drive home today. I totally agree with you, just from my personal experience of knowing that my family could have been supported, and all 9 of us could have been in one home rather than in 9 different homes, right? So, well, 8 different homes. But, you know, I completely agree that we need to focus more on family rather than only on either, you know, only on supporting the child, because you can't separate the child from the family. I totally agree. In my work as an educator, for me, I primarily work with kids. So my experience is often solely based on how to support kids. And one of the things that I really wanted to mention and that I wanted to talk about today was how, and I hope I conveyed this today, that there's so many gaps for kids on knowledge that they should have that should empower them. For kids in care specifically, that there's, you know, they come into care, and kind of like how I'd mentioned, they're not sure that there's a difference between, you know, their worker and an apprehension worker. And then they're not sure, you know, oh, they have a case plan. I have yet to meet a child who knows what's in their case plan, or most kids don't know what a case plan is, but who knows what's in it, right? And they should be asked what's in it. It should be developed with them. You know, I have very few kids that I've met that have a transition plan, or if the transition plan happens for when they're almost 18, it's literally, you know, they're 17 3/4 and they're starting their transition plan, and it should happen much earlier. And kids don't know, right? Or they don't know that they can ask questions to their social workers about, yeah, I am worried about my mom, you know, how's she doing? Yeah, I know she's struggling, but how's she doing? I'm worried about her. Are you helping her? You know, can I go back to her? Can I move foster homes? Can I see my birth sister? Can I see my long lost brother? I haven't seen him in years. You know, these are questions that kids have that that often they're, you know, they've asked once and maybe they didn't get an answer, so they've been silenced, and they don't have, you know, they're not being empowered to continuously ask. Or when it comes to, well, you know, my social worker, maybe they're you know, whatever, they're not contacting me as much as I'd like. Well, what can they do, right? What are their rights? What are their privileges as a youth in care. And I wish kids in care would know that, like people like me, like I'm a teacher, social workers, people like you guys, we're there because we're really supposed to work for the kids, right? They're like, we're supposed to be like we're there for them, like we're supposed to do best by them. And I think a lot of kids think that, oh, well, they're so powerful and they have so much authority over me, so I'm nervous about that. But I wish kids would know that we're actually supposed to be working for them, and that the system should work for them, and that the system is there to make their lives, it's supposed to make their lives the best it can be, even though often that's not the case. So I wish we could teach kids, as anybody who works with youth in care in any capacity, to empower them with the knowledge that they need, again, to navigate the system, to get those supports, to make it work for them. So that's what I hope that everybody can contribute to doing. If you know any kids in care in your life, that you can contribute to doing that. So sorry, just wanted to add that.
That's okay. That was marvelous. Thank you. Michael, if you wish, I can give you the last word. Is there any quick bits of advice you would have to a teacher and to a social worker?
I have nothing to say.
Okay.
You guys summed it up pretty well, what we need. And I agree with I gotta give it a thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Okay, well, again, thank you everyone for coming tonight. And I would just like to perhaps close out our series with a few words, because this is the final webinar in our series of 5, as Melanie talked about. So first of all, I really want to send a huge thank you out to Dawn and to Melanie and to Wong, who are incredibly committed to the success of this project. They amazingly hard work. They're a terrific group of women, and in my opinion, best team ever. So I really want to thank all of them for the work that they did. And again, I also want to point out that who would have thought a virtual world would have, in fact, who would have thought we would ever say it would be better than an in-person conference? And I saw people from Regina and from Ontario and from Nova Scotia, and we were all able to come into this world, and I think it worked really well. And as one of the women in our first presentation, one of our participants noted, you can bake a cake and do the dishes and still listen to a presentation. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that, right? So at the outset of this series, our objectives really were to share and to exchange our ideas, our stories around the educational needs and experiences of children and youth in care and their families. So one means of doing that was really bringing together all of us, what I think is a really diverse group of practitioners and social workers and students and advocates and government folks, everyone, with the goal of, if we can work better together, then hopefully children, youth, and their families will do better as well. For those of you who've attended some of these webinars, I hope that you will agree with me that all of the people who presented really illuminated that from a moral and from an ethical and from a professional level, this is a topic that we can no longer ignore or think that, it's something that we will deal with eventually. This is particularly true, as Marlon and Amy both talked about, in the Manitoba context. But I think the importance of this issue really extends far beyond Manitoba into all of Canada. It is really, as the stories we have heard, the unequivocal call to action, it has been thrown. Like, it is up to us now to really do what we can and to be guided in that by the experiences of our speakers. So again, I was just thinking back when I was closing out tonight, thinking about Kelly Gallagher's research, how we really need to be more inclusive of children and families who may not be in care, but who have child welfare involvement, that we really need to recognize that those, individual silos that still exist are not functional for children and families. So we need to work really hard to dismantling those silos in whatever way we can. In the context of the horrific and tragic loss of Tina Fontaine, the Manitoba Advocate confirmed for us that repeated and multiple disconnections from school, we must have a much better systemic response to those, because we must realize that, you know, whatever we're doing didn't work. And if anything, let's learn how to do better. Let's learn how to lean in. Let's learn how to make, you know, our invitations to families something that will help them, and not, as Marlon said, you know, harm them more. We need to do a much better job in that. Marie Christian's advocacy work with former youth in care really demonstrates that our support does not end at age 18, that we need to continue supporting youth as they transition out of care. And by doing so, they will know that they can move on to post-secondary or whatever career they want because they have that support. So that is really critical. I've always thought that Amy's efforts to create that school environment in which children in care are no longer invisible, right? Amy has done, and some of her colleagues have done an amazing job of, again, dismantling those boundaries that are often around children and youth in care. And those boundaries sometimes make them feel like they're less than. And Amy has done a marvelous job of dismantling those boundaries. And I think really fostering that much stronger sense of connectedness to everyone. And furthermore, you know, for all of us, I mean, our shout out is we need to keep up the good fight, right? The fact that, again, Jane has made university education free for anyone. You know, she's working her way across Canada. Ontario's done. I think she's heading out west next. You know, clearly that will be opportunities for former youth in care so that they can, you know, go on to post-secondary and not have to worry about the financial issues related to that. And again, we learned from Ann Edwards that it was deceptively simple, actually, that we need to accommodate, we, the professionals and foster caregivers, educators, we need to accommodate to the needs of children in care and their families rather than the other way. So we need to use our relational expertise in ways that we can support children in care and their families rather than having them accommodate to us. And, you know, again, finally, I just really want to thank everyone, you know, who through their stories really showed us why this work is important. We started with Trevor and Michael and Jane and Marie and Amy and Marlon and another Michael. There were two Michaels. How good can it get? You all did an absolutely painfully exquisite job of exposing how it is really the socially constructed ideas of who children in care are that are their barriers and that limit everyone's opportunities. You know, as professionals, we need to learn from you. And I'm going to swear, and I apologize for that, but damn it, you know, as Michael told us tonight, we need to do a better job. And we know now what we need to do. So again, every one of these webinars has been followed by a really rich discussion. And I really hope that we can keep these conversations going. We would love, as always, to get your feedback. Some of you have been sending it in. I hope that you continue to do so. We are going to use the website as our primary means of, you know, connecting with each other and posting our ideas about future projects. So I really, you know, hope that you can check in every once in a while and give us your thoughts. And again, just thank you so much for your support. I think it's been a great series. I want to thank SSHRC for funding this. And again, all of the presenters and all of the participants. So thank you very much. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Okay. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night. Bye.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.